She has brought some herbs, if you like.
It's like ginger and turmeric juice. You know?
Yeah, put it. Strong or mix it with water.
You can mix it with your water because it's very spicy.
Too spicy.
No, not too.
So friends, that Namo Buddhaya chanting means homage to the Buddha, but there are two levels to the meaning of the Buddha. One is the external Buddha, that means the historical Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, that lived and taught the Dhamma over 2,500 years ago. But he was called the Buddha because of a reason. Just like a doctor has a title, right? The brain surgeon, heart surgeon, psychiatrist, because they have special knowledge. Well, the Buddha had a special knowledge about the mind, about the nature of pure consciousness, and about the nature of how we've allowed ourselves to get the mind entangled in the inner tangle and the outer tangle, and the whole web of comic-induced suffering. And that is something that even Einstein and other, brilliant people these days, they couldn't explain it. Not in any coherent way. So the Buddha had this knowledge about that unconditioned state, or that state of the pure mind. It's just beneath the surface of our active, ego-bound mind. Deep down, the subtlest vibration of consciousness is the state of the deathless state, or the unborn state. But anyway, we call it, to simplify it, we call it present moment awareness. And it's sort of like the engine of a car in neutral gear. If you have a car, you have a manual shift and you're shifting through, but if you put it in the neutral gear, and it has a perfectly idling engine, is perfectly idling. It's sort of like a cat purring, right? And you can rev up the engine, but the car doesn't go anywhere. So that state of awareness is, within all of us, is sort of the deeper nature of the mind. But again, we've lost that contact with it. So I like to call that actually the inner Buddha. Because when you reach that state of awareness, that non-reactive awareness, which even transcends the ego, the thoughts of I, me, or mine, and becomes what we call the ocean of awareness, then all the answers about the world and the universe are answered. And that's what, the enlightenment is. And that's what the Buddha had, that experience, as well as so many others too. So when I do that kind of chanting, that's the kind of the meaning, the deeper meaning of it, that is we're trying to tune into that vibration of awareness that's beneath all of the fluctuations of the mind. And basically that awareness, you reach that through the body, because again, the body is where that vibration is in the material plane, is our access point to it. It's really the life force. So anyway, that's just the one way that you can try to relate to that, because a lot of people say to take refuge in the Buddha. Yeah, but then the Buddha passed away 2,500 years ago, so really we have to take refuge in his Dhamma. But of course we can get inspiration by reading the life of the Buddha and so on, but with this acknowledging that vibration of awareness is inside of us all the time, and even if we can't feel it, just intellectually sort of believing it, or trying to tune into it. Of course, that's what the practice of meditation is tuning into that. Because as I mentioned, we've lost that. Now the baby had that for the first few months of the life. All of you mothers, you probably, if you had a baby, a baby's mind is kind of what they call oceanic, when it's born. It doesn't have any center, doesn't have any nucleus of a little me or I in it yet. But as I mentioned last night, when the relatives start coming over and holding it and giving it all kind of affection, giving it things, and little by little, what used to be a very expansive oceanic awareness kind of get condensed or coagulates somewhere, behind the eyes, into this feeling of an I is here, or a me. But that's created. That's not something that you are actually born with. Although the latent seeds of ignorance naturally are there, but still, no one has ever taught us about that. I mean, anybody, you ever know, did they teach you about that when you're a young child? No? Why not? No? Keep the awareness of the body. Don't lose the awareness of the body. No, go after that. The mind, the eyes are jump ahead of the body. And that's why we've lost that connection to the body, because of the hurry to consume and the hurry to want to, get the object of our desire, or whatever we're doing, to be busy. So the meditation practice, the practice of the meditation, of course, is based on the four foundations of mindfulness. So the Buddha was really like a scientist. I like to regard the Buddha not as a religious figure necessarily, although you could say he is, but more or less he was really a scientist. He was a body and mind scientist, or especially a mental scientist. And his interest was to find the source of suffering. Isn't that a valid scientific proposition? Isn't it? Where a lot of scientists start with, they want to find a cure for cancer or some other disease. Well, the Buddha saw that there was a disease causing suffering. And that was being disconnected from the truth, being disconnected from present moment awareness, and being lost in the external world, and depending on your happiness on the external things. In other words, we've lost that connection with the natural happiness of the present moment. Because again, when the mind is resting in the present moment, there's nothing to think, judge, like, dislike, hate, anything in them. So the mind is naturally, it's in a state of, I don't even like to call it happiness, it's beyond happiness. Because people's idea of happiness is kind of corrupted these days. They think it's kind of, oh, I want $1 million. No. Okay. But that kind of happiness depends on stuff that can vanish very quickly. As we've seen with these lottery winners, that won millions, and in a couple of months they were stone broke. So anyway, so coming back to this, the Buddhist teaching is about how to, reconnect with this fundamental ground of life, with the life force, which is that awareness. Because again, we've lost that connection, and doctors are not telling us about it. Neither are a lot of other, maybe some particular religious persons might be kind of, but they don't really give you a step-by-step way to cultivate the way to get reconnected to it. And I would call it, a term for that might be mental physics. We have to understand how the mind operates and how it's gotten itself too much involved in the external world, which cannot be a source of ultimate happiness because it's always changing. And so whatever you might get, there's always the fear of losing it and the pain of getting things that, painful things that you may not want. So as I mentioned before, most of the life, 99% of our life, could be even more than that, is caught up in this the pleasure-pain syndrome. That means is searching for some kind of pleasure or comfort, and the fear of avoiding pain, as we already mentioned last night, with the ant and so on. But because of everything is impermanent, this is that second law of nature that I mentioned, the first law of nature being the karma, that, following Newton's law, every reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you give out greed, hatred, and delusion, you'll get back greed, hatred, and delusion from others. And if you put out love and kindness and friendliness, then you will get that back also. Maybe not immediately, but in due time. So anyway, the practice of the meditation is that practice how to reconnect. And as we've already been talking about, the first the four foundations of mindfulness, the Buddha said that mindfulness of the body comes first, and there's a reason for that, and that's because the mind operates through the body. So if we're not grounded in the body, we won't be able to see how the mind functions, because those functionings of the mind are happening at subtler levels. And it's like, if your clock or some electronic gadget malfunctions, then can you just look at the clock and say, hey, work. You gotta know what's going on with it, right? So you have to open it up and you have to go in and look. So that's what the practice of the Vipassana meditation is. It's being able to look sort of within the mind to find the source of the suffering. So, as I've already mentioned several times, the first stage of meditation is learning how to become centered and grounded in the body, and that means having some degree ability to stay focused, which means, let's say, concentration. Now, our mind is the normal mind of people is very, well, you all know the ADD. Now, what is that? ADD?
ADHD.
Yeah, that's so prevalent in the world now, right? Before they thought kids only had it. Now they know adults have it too, right? So basically that means they can't concentrate because the mind is just jumping around due to restlessness or so many conditioned factors, and can't stay focused. So by concentrating on a limited area, which is the breathing in the body, again, that's the most natural, because that's where you were for the first 9 months of your life. Maybe you weren't breathing at that time in the womb, but at least you had heart beating. And after 9 months, I don't know all those figures. Heart starts beating. But anyway, so you use that to become centered and grounded in the body. And then the next stage is feeling the body and feeling the subtler vibrations in the body. That's called mindfulness of feelings. Now, there's sometimes people get feelings kind of misunderstand the feelings because of the English language. So in the teachings of meditation, the Vedanusati, or mindfulness of feelings, specifically is being aware when a painful feeling is starting to grab your mind, or a pleasant feeling is starting to grab your mind, or a neutral feeling. But neutral feelings, because they don't really cause much karma, direct karma, the painful and the pleasant ones are the most important ones to understand, because most of our karma is directed at again, trying to get a hold of pleasurable feelings that we don't yet have. And if we do have them, to hold on to them. Don't allow them to change. And the fear of getting painful feelings coming to you, and if they do come to you, the struggling to get away from them. And that goes from very obvious, gross levels to very, very subtle levels. Even the blinking. Anybody know why you blink? Why you blink? You got any eye doctors here? Because there's some kind of irritation there, right? So there's an unconscious wish, even though it's not really conscious, you're not actually thinking that, you just do it out of habit. That's because there's an unpleasant feeling there and you wish to get away from it. So even in something as innocuous as that, as kind of subtle as that process is still working. The aversion to unpleasant feeling. And then, because we have a lot of painful feelings, then our only recourse is to try to create pleasant feelings. Like people take drugs or alcohol to get out of their painful feelings of whatever they might be, for example, or other obsessions, and so on. It's almost everything we do is how to get more pleasurable feeling, and we do that and escaping the painful feeling. So that's a never-ending street. I mean, that's like that'll be a dead end because everything is constantly changing. So the Buddha opted for, the Buddha saw there's a way out, and that is keeping the mind in the middle. And really, the body and breathing is the only thing we have that's with us all the time, as I've already mentioned. Everything else is not reliable. So we carry this body with us. What's that called? Oh, yeah, 24/7. And then 365. And then, what's the last number? We don't know how many years we'll live, right? But anyway, so we're carrying this body around with us 24/7, 365. Why not use it for the best purpose? How's that? That's a new way of thinking. Instead of just satisfying your desires or something, use it for really the ultimate purpose of attaining of reaching the highest level of happiness, which is in the middle between pleasure and pain. So, anyway, so in the when you're meditating, once you're able to, now actually, this morning when we were meditating, and I was kind of counting the breaths for you in the first part of the meditation. How many feel that helped them to keep coming back to their breathing? And then when I said do it on your own without any prompting from me, did anybody find it more difficult? But really, the counting the breaths is one of the most simple and probably the most effective practice or technique for learning how to gain initial concentration. Because if you can follow your breaths and count the breaths from 1 to 10 without the mind getting lost in thoughts. Now, thoughts may come and go, and other things may be coming and going, but it may not be enough to actually get you lost from the count. So if you can do that from 1 to 10, that's almost a miracle for most people. And that's what I would say. I'd consider the first kind of stage of what you could call any kind of real concentration. Even that in itself is a mediocre one, but still from our normal, confused, excited mind, it's a great achievement. And you would be fairly well centered there in the body, even though things may still be coming and going and you still have thoughts. The fact that you can at least keep the mind knowing and connected to some sensations, and it doesn't have to be only the breathing, but the breathing, the breathing is the missing link. The breathing is the bridge that connects us from the external world to the inner world. So you're taking breath in from the external world, right? Touches your nostrils. So that's the outside of the body, and then it goes into the lungs, and you feel the expansion and contraction of the lungs. So the breath gets us to the external body, because normally we're not aware of the external body. at least much of the time, because we're lost in our thoughts, or half drowsy and asleep. So first we have to find the external body. So, you feel the hands touching together, buttocks pressing the seat, clothing touching the skin. That's a very good awareness point. Hardly ever feel any other teachers ever mention using that as an object of awareness. But it's always there. I mean, unless you're nude, I guess. But most people are always usually wearing something. And just to feel that slight tactical, because it's not really a painful feeling usually. And it's something that's there's a lot of them, right? So if you don't have enough to feel, then the mind will immediately escape into thoughts or go to sleep. Those are the two main problems. Either you go to sleep because you're bored, or the mind escapes into fantasies or other anger or aversion and memories, but not staying in the present moment. So the ability to stay in the present moment and not go to sleep and not getting carried away in your thoughts, that's when you can then start clearly observing other things. So the breathing gets you to the surface of the body. Then as you focus, keep your mind on the body itself, naturally you'll start feeling the subtler sensations inside. Like the sensations of the breathing, but not only that, so many little, tingling sensations, the pulse of blood in the arteries. There are too many to even try to number. So many sensations, but those life force vibrations, so many of them, which include also prickling sensations, little itchy feelings, stinging sensations, of course, minor aches and pains. And all of them become really a powerful training. We want those to happen because most people have very low pain tolerance, because their mind is always wanting more and more comfort. So the slightest little discomfort, even like having sweaty clothes on your skin, or just any other little aches or pains, itchy feelings, and none of these are going to kill you, and none of them are really going to harm you either. And so if you just learn to observe them and relax around them, you can actually get a lot of joy from knowing, oh, I can do this. I don't always have to be constantly moving around and doing that. Because every time you do that, you're wasting your energy. And every time you react to unpleasant sensations, you're reaffirming the idea that I don't like it. I want to get rid of it. And that clinging to the I, of course, is the deepest level of suffering. So by learning how to observe, as you sit longer in meditation, the more and more pains will come up. But that's a very important part of the meditation training, to be able to relax around them and to understand that they're impermanent. Now, the reason why you itch is because you think it's going to last forever. And so you want to quickly get rid of it. But if you just resist that and just be aware, oh, itchy, it's not that bad, is it? A little itch, and just endure it for 2 or 3 more seconds, it'll vanish. Because most itches are like that, unless it's poison ivy, of course, or something like that. But most little itchy feelings or little prickly sensations that are always come. How many people could feel any of those things in their meditation? Really? I'm not crazy? So, that's really a very active part of the meditation, but a lot of people just overlook that. And they think, no, it shouldn't happen. You want to have some kind of perfect condition for meditation. But, so the Vedanusati is observing these sensations Because it's the painful ones that cause us the most reaction. Pleasant ones are pleasant to feel, and we'd like to have them, but they're not going to last either. But at least they don't cause us a direct kind of pain. But it's the unpleasant ones, always kind of moving around, and if you count up, how many ever counted up the number of times you did that in one day? It would be over 1,000, I'm sure. And every time you do that, it's a waste of energy, and you reinforce the idea of hatred. I don't like it. But if you just endure the patience, and that endurance comes from having gotten concentrated. That's why, unless you initially concentrate the mind, being able to count at least to 10, but maybe do that 2 or 3 times in a row, that acts as a tranquilizer. That's like getting injected with a tranquilizer, but a natural tranquilizer. And even if you do deep, slow breathing for about 10 minutes uninterrupted, that also produces the same type of tranquilizing effect in the nervous system. That's why deep, slow breathing is a very powerful method. This is a yogic method. Now, in Buddhism, they usually tell you, don't control the breath, don't control the breath. But that would be okay if people know how to breathe in the first place. But people's bodies are half dead. And that's giving rise to so many other problems because of not getting enough oxygen into the system. And by the way, nowadays, I get, these little internet news feeds and stuff, doctors are actually telling people to do more deep breathing these days. Yoga was talking about that thousands of years ago. And only now they're saying do some deep breathing? Come on. So, anyway, all these things are interrelated and interconnected in the body and the mind. And actually, that little booklet that I think some of you got today, the body-mind connection, it's talking about that. There's a lot of people thinking that meditation is just something you do with the mind, but the body is intimately involved in that because everything goes through the body before it reaches the mind. So anyway, the ability to observe those sensations and seeing how they're impermanent. And then also your thoughts. And the thoughts are going to be coming and going all the time. A lot of people think that meditation have to stop their thoughts. And that's why they get very frustrated, because you won't be able to stop your thoughts, not until you reach a very, very high level of concentration. And the ultimate goal is not necessarily stopping your thoughts. It's not getting lost in your thoughts. But more on that in a moment. So in the meditation, first we use the body and the posture, learning how to maintain the straight posture, because that makes a difference in the meditation. How many people recognize when you meditate that, if you caught yourself sleeping like this, your mind wasn't very clear. And if you just kind of, straighten up the body, lift up the chin a little bit, that the mind becomes more bright and clear. Anybody ever notice it? There must be a reason then, right? For what I already been talking about earlier. So that posture awareness, that's something that also is not emphasized too much. There's too much emphasis on just breath, breath, breath. Right? To feel a little point at the tip of the nose. That's another story. But in the beginning, that's not necessary. And learning how to do deep breathing and using that and to help maintain the posture. And then once you get relaxed and centered in the present moment, then if you let go of that deeper breathing and then focus more clearly, then you can then notice more and more and finer kind of sensations. But the idea is not to block out the world. The idea is to reach a state of centeredness, relaxed centeredness, in which you can see the world coming through us. That means the moment-to-moment stimulations, different sensations, sounds, and a stream of thoughts that are constantly going through the mind. So, when we were doing walking meditation this morning, and I, suggested kind of, when we stopped, just trying to notice that, feel the sensations in the body and hearing the sounds coming and going. How many people think they might have heard some of that? Was that a state of kind of more expanded awareness? You could actually notice like many things going on almost simultaneously. You have many different sensations in the body and hear a number of sounds on the right, sounds on the left, sounds in the front, sounds from behind. Notice thoughts going through your mind or an urge to scratch. And that's called the flow of impermanence. And that's what actually Vipassana meditation is. It's about tuning in to the flow of impermanence to see how our body and mind actually works. And the Buddha gave a very interesting, he gave one discourse called the All, Sabha Sutta, the All. So he was, talking to the monks. He says, "Monks, I'll give you a talk on the All." They were all ears, He said, "What is the All? It's the eye, forms and seeing. The ear, sounds and hearing. The nose, smells and smelling. The tongue, tastes and tasting. The body, the sensations and feeling. And thoughts, memories and thinking, or consciousness." So anyway, these 6, and these are constantly changing. And what is called life are just moments of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking and reacting to those things that are constantly changing at a very high speed. Normally we don't see that because we just take life for granted and we just think we're a person here looking out these eyeballs and the world is there, and we have no idea how the mind is working. So this is the Buddha wanted us to understand what is the consciousness and how it's gotten entangled with the world. And actually, there's another little jingle. There's a jingle. How many people have heard of the Visuddhimagga? Famous book, Visuddhimagga, and Buddhaghosa. I know the monks have probably heard about that. So at the start of that book, at the beginning of that book, there's somebody had come to the Buddha, might have been a deva, and said, "The inner tangle and the outer tangle. This world is entangled in a tangle." And I asked the Master Gautama, who succeeds in disentangling this tangle? And that's when the Buddha said, one who is standing on the firm foundation of sila, that means sensory restraint, and developing mindfulness and concentration, they succeed in disentangling this tangle. So what is the inner tangle and the outer tangle? The outer tangle is all the millions and millions of potential sensory objects that are coming through our senses. And the inner tangle is the accumulated memories and habits and ways of reacting and desires and aversions connected with these objects. And every time you react to an object, either with desire or aversion or some other kind of reaction, some physical thing, telling lies, killing, stealing, intoxicating the mind, the mind is getting further entangled like a ball of string of a cat. How many people have a cat at home? You throw a ball of string and the thing will be all over the place. It'll be all tangled up in a mess. Or like your hair. Because when I was young, I rode a motorcycle, I had long hair. My gosh, it was a mess afterwards. We didn't wear helmets in those days. So that's like our mind is tangled up like that with the world, full of hates and likes, and dislikes. And that's what dominates our life. So this process of disentangling that tangle is really, again, the process of the 4 foundations of mindfulness and the 7 factors of enlightenment. But again, it starts with the body, because that's where it is. When you get grounded and centered in the body and you're able to just keep continuously remember or feeling, you don't have to say it, but that awareness is there of, this body is sitting and breathing, breathing in, sitting, breathing out, sitting, and that kind of feeling, that outline of the body. The breathing is there in the middle, but all around the breathing, there's other sensations coming and going. And that is your balcony seat. That's the balcony seat to the greatest movie in the world. People pay all this money to go to movie theaters. What? Their mind is cranking out the most craziest movies, better than these other movies. But when we meditate, that's what we're doing. We're taking a balcony seat. That means you're getting some detachment to it. And just, sitting, breathing, sitting, breathing. So there's some space, there's some detachment created in the awareness. So you're kind of just watching, the breath is coming in, the breath is coming out. Sitting, breathing. And then if something, a little itch comes on the body, there's an itch there. Okay. Or if a sound comes through the ear, okay, the sound comes through. But you're watching it with that same kind of detachment. So the ability to watch your breathing and body with that detachment then is used for the things coming through our ears or smells or tastes or even painful, unpleasant sensations that are going on. That same kind of space is there, what I call a buffer zone. We call it the buffer zone of awareness. You all know what a buffer zone is, right? Okay, so that's what we're creating in mindfulness practice. The ability to just watch without reacting to what is there, even if it's a painful feeling. And because if you just watch something for a few moments or longer without reacting, that object will most likely vanish, or it will decrease in intensity that it no longer really holds your attention, and that you can be aware of other things. There's always so many things in the body or coming through the senses that we can pay attention to. There's no reason to let your mind get stuck on any particular memory or feeling, because there's always something else you can notice. And the mind can really only notice or react to one thing at a time. So if we're able to feel many things at one time, the mind can't really react to any particular one, because we have that expanded awareness. That's really the key to the practice of awareness, or especially the Vipassana, Satipatthana Vipassana system. And so that that's key, is setting up that, get your tickets, to the theater. Means, or another analogy would be the scientist in a laboratory. So the Buddha, as I mentioned this morning, was like a scientist. He wanted to find a cause of suffering. He wanted to find the end of the world. I don't know how many of you heard this story about the Rohitisa, the Deva. So there was a Deva, and Devas can travel very long, like cover 100 miles in just some few strides or walking. And one day this Deva got up and said, I want to find the end of the world. So he started walking. He got kind of tired. And then he said, well, we'll go ask somebody. So he started to ask these different sages and so-called enlightened masters that were around at the time. And they asked him, how do I find the end of the world? They would scratch their head and say, what's it? You go to somebody else and get the same reply. And finally, one person said, hey, why don't you go ask Mahabrahma? I mean, he's the one who created the world, right? I mean, that's their belief. So he should know the end of the world. He created it. So Rohita, brilliant idea. Why didn't I think of that? So he went up to the Brahma Loka. And the Mahabrahma, I mean, that's equivalent to the idea of a god or something, so he was giving a lecture to all of his disciples, lesser gods. And so Rohitisa came up and he said, tell me how I can reach the end of the world. And the Brahma says, shh, don't talk so loud. I don't want my disciples to hear. I don't know. Go ask the Buddha. So Mahabrahma advised him, go ask the Buddha how to get to the end. And the guy said, I just left the Buddha. It's like here, we always go to somebody else to find the truth. And so he comes back to the Buddha and he asks Buddha this question, how do I find it? And Rohitisa explains what had happened. He said, Rohitisa, my dear, you're never going to find the end of the world by running or by physically traveling. And that's when he made his famous statement that the world, the arising of the world, the ceasing of the world, and the path leading to the ceasing of the world is right here within this 5 or 6 foot long body with its nervous system, memory, and consciousness. So, that's what the Buddha was interested in, is how our mind creates the world. I'd already mentioned that before. And again, the world is not this solar system. There's nothing to do with this solar system. Earth, Pluto, Mars, the sun, and all these things. Science is interested in discovering all those things. But they're not interested about discovering the mind. No, that's got convoluted somehow. How was that? The interest in science is to find out the beginning and ending of the Earth and the solar system. I mean, it's one of their ideas, right? But the Buddha was the only one who said, I want to find the beginning of the world in the mind, how the mind creates the idea of the world. So that's what makes the Buddha the Buddha. So anyway, coming back to the process of meditation. Just a moment. So the second stage of meditation, as I mentioned, is to then tune in to the flow of impermanence and seeing how quickly these moments of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking, or the sensations and our thoughts, are coming and going. And by learning how to not react to them, that you see how they vanish very quickly, or you don't hold on to them. And because there's always something else to notice. Like if you're disturbed by a sound over here, listen to something on the other side, or something from the front or the back. You'll feel something on your toe, because there's something everywhere. Our senses are open for business 24/7, except maybe when you're sleeping. But even then you're dreaming, but you don't have conscious control over that much. But in our waking life, they're all open for business. And we don't know what is going to come through them at any moment, right? And whatever the mind clings to, it builds its world upon that. You could be, deeply involved in doing something else, and all of a sudden you hear a siren going down the road, or you hear some other sound, and the mind just immediately, comes away from that and starts creating another world of worry and fear, or thoughts around something else. And it could do that again 2 minutes later on something else, and then something else. And so basically whatever the mind is focusing on, and that's just where your world is created. Like struggling with a pain you're trying to get away from, or struggling with an idea of some person you don't like, or the opposite that you crave for. And your mind builds its world. That is the world for the Buddha. But that's where you're living. And that is what is affecting your life. So again, that's what is important to understand about the mind. I mean, there's a lot can be more said for that, but as we go into the next meditations, if you reach that point of being able to, have fairly good awareness and kind of feel that sense of just being able to observe the body and feel things coming and going, then instead of just because when that happens, when you get a little concentration and awareness, it feels so pleasant that the mind will kind of go, that's enough for me, that's all I want, because it's so pleasing. And so the mind kind of then stagnates, and it gets stuck in just this kind of superficial little feeling good state. But it's not really meditation, and it's not going any deeper, so you have to avoid that. And avoiding that is by tuning into the flow of impermanence. And that's even much more interesting, to see how quickly things come and go. And how things don't have to bother you if you don't cling on to them. And you can get tuned into the flow of impermanence. That's really the much more satisfying than being absorbed in white light or whatever other visions you might be having and so on. So that's what I'd like to encourage you to work on. And it's just a matter of just being awake. You don't have to look for anything, because things will come to you. All you have to do is just maintain that awareness of breathing in, sitting, breathing out, sitting in. Things will come to you. You don't have to look for anything. The only thing is, if we're lost in our thoughts, that's what we have to kind of control, those two things. Sleepiness, you have to overcome sleepiness, or fatigue. Somebody mentioned that had a lot of fatigue, and that is one of the biggest hindrances to meditation. But there's so many causes of that, and can't really go explain all those. But the main one is probably that poor circulation of the life force, and by doing deep breathing and and also before that doing some stretches to get that life force out to the cells, and hopefully when you sit to meditate, then you'll be more awake and alert. And then, of course, the thoughts. It's learning how to let go of the thoughts and not get carried away in them. So, I think we're reaching the limit of our schedule here. Okay. So, now we're going to slowly stand up and do some standing and maybe some little walking before we sit down again. Because again, if I just made you start sitting right now in meditation, then the pains would very quickly come, and that would be a disturbance. So go ahead and mindfully stand up. And for people that have more trouble with sleepiness or, pain in their body because of, the unusual cross-legged sitting position and so on, standing meditation is, an equally or second alternative good, because you can't go to sleep when you're standing because of the fear of falling down. So it's going to force you to stay more awake, and you may not have so much pains in your joints, but you're going to get pains in your feet after standing a long time. But anyway, it's a very, especially for awareness, standing is a very powerful form of meditation that hardly anybody ever talks about. So you just try to stand straight. Relax your arms at the sides. Just gently close your eyes. Focus on feeling the eyes resting in the socket. The eyelids stretched over the eyeballs. Feel that outline of the standing body, sense of the head, face in front of you. Feel some prickling sensation on your face, the skin stretched over the skull. It's like you're looking at your face, eyes closed, the inner canal of awareness. Your nose,